Grandfather Creator, we're very thankful for this friendship, for this circle of allies. We pray for wisdom. I was told never ever pray for patience or you'll get tested, so I'll leave that out. We just pray for humor. And thank you for this day. Thank you for the rain. Thank you for all of the people in our circles of friends and families. Pray for health. Pray for safety for all of the travelers. Say all my CIF.
So I'm wondering if we can just go and start with Marilyn to begin your introduction and tell folks about yourself.
Well,
Use your microphone. Thanks.
I didn't know I was going to be doing an introduction, so just briefly, my name is Marilyn Kimmerling. I'm 69 years old. Somebody's phone is ringing. That happened in court too. And at that time, Ramona said, "Throw it out the door." Right. So I'm probably sitting here because I was part of a group called Tacoma Direct Action that had decided that nothing was going to happen unless we were willing to risk civil disobedience. And the group was fairly small, and of that group, there were 6 of us that decided that we were willing to risk arrest. But we had many, many other people in the group that were helping us, and we had the support of a lot of different groups in the community also. They might not have known at the time exactly what we were up to, but they were certainly supporters. So, yeah, on May 17th, because how many people here have not heard about the LNG plant? I figured that, so I'm not going to tell about that again. Anyhow, because of the LNG plant, we knew that we had to get the word out more to the community about what was happening. A lot of people at that time didn't know about it, and if they had heard about it, they had been basically greenwashed by Puget Sound Energy into thinking it was going to be a wonderful deal. We locked down to draw attention to the problem, and Cynthia and I took it to court, and we won. And we have to celebrate every small thing. We won not in the way that we expected to. We were hoping to be able to use a necessity defense and a climate defense, but we won because the jury decided that the city had not made its case that they owned the property that they wanted to build the plant on. And the tribal treaty rights from 1854 clearly stated that the fishing rights and that the land belonged to the Puyallup Nation. So if we were not trespassing because it didn't belong to the city, then we could not possibly be obstructing the police who didn't belong there in our arrest. So that's the story. And I have a few things that I want to say to people, but I want to look out at the audience first, and I'll keep this very brief. I see some young people, and one of the things that I was really interested in doing tonight is it's possible that young people who are already involved in the battle and already fighting to save our planet from catastrophic climate change and are deeply involved in the struggle, and my hands are up to you because the work is so necessary. I'm hoping that the things that we can talk about tonight will help you have a better perspective from a wide range point of view, from the point of view of women looking backwards through time and what sustained them and what kept them going and gave them energy so that they didn't lose heart. And that's all I have to say.
Well, I made a little speech, but I think I'm going to try to do it without it. I was very affected by the valve turners, and Annette is going to talk to you about that. When they did that tremendous event, actually shutting down 5 pipelines coming from Canada, they took a lot of time figuring it out. It was a brilliant idea. But more than that, I really believe that they had changed the paradigm. No longer can we believe in our government to help us prevent climate change or even nuclear war. If we are going to change things, we are going to have to be the ones that get out there. And so when I heard what they had done, I was really very mad. Mad because they hadn't included me in it. And I began looking for a place to chain myself to. That's what I said. I thought it was going to be a railroad track because we had done that before. But it would be anything that had to do with fossil fuel. And so I joined Seattle Rising Tide, who had been very helpful in supporting us when we had done some actions as the Raging Grannies. And I joined their group. They were called upon by the Tacoma Direct Action Group to come and train them in direct action, and I went along with them. And then when they decided to do it, I had no choice, but I had to go with them. It was a marvelous thing. I have to say, when people ask me, how do I feel? I am a very happy person. I am living a life of meaning. And if you don't have meaning in your life, what's the point? Many people confuse meaning with pleasure. Having a new car or a better house, that can make you, that gives you pleasure, but it doesn't make you happy. So this is what I do now, and I encourage everybody. We are in very serious condition now. We're about to have nuclear war, or climate change is going to destroy the planet. And if we don't do something to stop it now, well, there's no hope for us. So we're here to encourage you to get out there. You know, not everybody can chain themselves to things, but you can put money in. And we're going to be asking you to do that tonight. After all, you've got to start giving like your life depends upon it, because it really does. Okay.
I feel like I've been at this for a long, long time.
You have, Ramona.
150 years.
Something like that. No, when Marilyn was talking, when she was on trial, they asked the question, what made you think that you had the right to be where you were? And the answer to that was there were signs everywhere that said stand with the Puyallups. and so she did. But you know, I haven't been in this American Friends Hall for God, it literally has been over 40 years. And some years ago, I was here visiting, and they had a book. They had a brand new book called Uncommon Controversy. Is that my phone again? There's no silence in it. It has a mind of its own. It's going, Tracy, Tracy, carry me around. It went off in court. Tracy was trying to remedy the situation, and so she had my phone and she was running around, and that judge is really mean to anybody that's got a phone.
Ramona, I turned it off, but it also silenced it. So now it's just dead.
You just think you did. It'll sneak up behind you. anyway, I've seen this book, and it was Uncommon Controversy, and it had a little salmon. Have any of you seen that book? It had a little salmon on the front of it, and I liked it. And I looked and I seen who drew that little fish, and it was Alex Jackson. And I knew him. He was Tlingit, and he was just kind of like a street person, but nice man. And I asked him, when I seen him, I told him, I like your little fish. That's nice. And he told me I could use it anytime, any place I ever wanted to. And so, you know, I just had that book with me. Well, when Puyallup Tribe finally needed letterhead and finally had checks, I put that little salmon on the checks on the corner and on the paper on the corner, and used it for what was supposed to be temporary letterhead until we had a real logo. I can't tell you how many consuls have come along behind me and put up different logos, and that little fish survives. It's on everything. If you go into any place in that, even our tribal paper, it's all over the tribal paper. So I got that little fish here, and when we did the Indian Child Welfare Act and we were lobbying it, we got beat up by the Mormons. We had 70 Mormon men that signed up to testify against the Indian Child Welfare Act, each one of them telling us what drunks we were and how incompetent we were. And we had already testified. They put us at the very front. And so these senators just had person after person tell them what a bunch of dirty, drunken bums we were. And then the last guy that testified, we didn't know any of these people, but the last guy signed up was a Quaker.
Excuse me.
And he talked about a child that was placed with them and how they went and found the family and how rich the culture was and how the circumstances of institutional racism had pounded that whole tribe into poverty, but how the families were still strong. And he flipped the script. And the last thing that the senators could remember was his good words. And our act passed, and we were able to begin protecting our children. And then these girls reminded me on the way here that Nixon was a Quaker. And Nixon did what I call the Self-Determination Proclamation. In '69, he said basically things were so screwed up, the Indians would have been much better off if we had just handled our own affairs. And I quit calling the feds to protect our fishermen from the state game wardens and fisheries agents. And we did a camp, a security camp, a camp of observers that eventually became an armed camp and eventually resulted in the Bolt decision, which clarified our right to harvest and our right to protect our salmons. And in our religion, we're taught that that's what we were put here for, to protect the nations of salmons. And so we immediately began cleaning up halibut. That was our very first thing that we cleaned up. We pulled wrecked cars out of the creek and box springs and, you know, all kinds of garbage. We cleaned it. And Hylabus is where they're putting the LNG. It's right there, sitting on arsenic slag from Asarco. And so the cleanup has to continue. But I really believe we wouldn't have done a lot of the things we did if it wasn't for Nixon telling us. We would have been better off. We took that as a go ahead to do it ourselves. And we did do better. He was absolutely right. Are we sure?
Well, I'm Annette Klapstein, and I had the honor of working as staff attorney for the Puyallup Tribe for 21 years. So I've known Ramona for quite some time, and I did get to work on fisheries issues after the Bolt decision, and continuing to try to protect the tribe's treaty rights. I've been retired now for over 10 years, and I have been very active on social justice and environmental justice issues. I've been a member of the Seattle Raging Grannies for about 15 years now. As Cynthia noted, the Grannies have been involved in a number of actions, including Shell No, shutting down the port with Block to our rocking chairs. I've been arrested a number of times, but the most recent action that I was involved in, as Cynthia pointed out, was 5 of us, including Emily, who was with me in Minnesota, along with some support team, went to 4 different states and shut down the 5 tar sands pipelines coming from Canada in October of 2016. We broke in and we shut the valves off. And we did this in solidarity with Standing Rock, which was the focal point of resistance at that point, and they had called for actions in solidarity. So we went out and did that. As I think many of you may know, tar sands are the absolute worst of the worst. They have absolutely destroyed the land, the water, everything up there, and they are the worst of the carbon-intensive fossil fuel products, which, if used as directed, will destroy the planet. Basically, you burn them and you put the most possible carbon into the air. So the fossil fuel companies are, in my mind, committing crimes against humanity every single day. And I am, to the point in my life where I care about my children and the generations that will be coming in the future more than I care about my own security, which is why I was willing to do this. It doesn't matter really what happens to me now, but it matters intensely to me. Well, not compared to future generations.
Right.
I mean, at my stage of life, I'm willing to sacrifice. I may very well go to jail, and I'll update you at some appropriate point on where all of our trials are at. But we were all arrested. We, all have been facing felony charges, and obviously I don't want to go to jail, but I'm willing, if that's what it takes, to turn it around. And I do not believe we have a government on any level who is willing to address the massive problem that climate change is. It's an absolute threat to the ongoing existence of humanity at this point, and none of our politicians are addressing it, so it's up to us.
So on to the questions. Before I actually start asking questions, I also wanted to note that Native Daily Network is here live streaming. So thank you so much for being here. And as I ask questions, I want to ask the panelists. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. If it's a hard one.
You have a right to remain silent.
Right to remain silent. Use against you. and it is being recorded. And I have plenty of questions, so if I'll just move on if you don't like any of them. You can tell me, you're my elders.
So don't forget to ask about the hop in the river.
I have no idea what that is. So I thought my first question is, so the name of this panel is Grandmothers in the Resistance. And I was wondering, are you all grandmothers? and what does it mean for you to be a grandmother at this time?
My granddaughter is right over there. Stand up. You're my prof.
So should we just answer?
Yeah, I think I'm the only honorary grandmother here. My children have not chosen to reproduce, though they are in their 30s.
Is that a statement?
Well, I'm grandmother. I have 7 grandchildren, and I have 4 great-grandchildren. And so it's more imperative than ever for me to see that my great-grandchildren have a livable planet. And the way we're going now, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. It makes me very angry when there are so many people who just shine the problems on, like they don't affect them, or they're going to be gone before the worst happens, or we cannot think that way anymore. We have to get out there and act. And as I said before, if you can't put your body on the line, you can give your money.
There's I'm a grandmother, and what it means to me, being an older woman who has children and grandchildren, that's a really profound question, because Mark Twain would say we are all descended from grandmothers, and we are. Hopefully, the women, because they have that history of nurturing and raising and bringing forth life in generations, can hold that sacred space that we need to start turning this civilization that we got around to be one of life instead of war and death. And I dared you, because sometimes we can get so passionate, Cynthia, that we lose all humor and we can scare people away. And I really want to bring people in, because it's a joyous struggle. It's very, very important that as we do the work, that we celebrate, we laugh, we enjoy beauty, and we love and we take care of each other.
You know, I have people ask me, did you ever think that you would see your grandchildren using the clinic or going to the school? And truly, I didn't think I would ever see that, because I actually expected to be killed in the fishing camp. And again, when we kicked the state out of the hospital building and held it for a week, they were promising to blow us up. And so truly, I didn't expect to live through either of those things. So I knew I was going to love my future generations without ever seeing their faces, but I really didn't expect to ever see any of them. And now my great-granddaughter is expecting. Autumn is going to have a baby, so I really will be great, and grand.
Wow.
And she's using the clinic. Maybe I'll probably go to the school. So I think I'll stick around for a while. It's getting even more interesting.
And how old are you, Ramona? Do you want to tell folks?
Oh, you know,
she's going there.
These women are about my same age, and they climbed up into the construction equipment. You don't see me climbing construction equipment. You might find me playing Free Cell or Bejeweled. You won't find me climbing any equipment. I'm 79. I'll be 80 this summer, if I'm lucky. I plan on it.
I'll be 80 next month. And I really feel like my life has so much meaning right now that I'm going to stick around for quite a while. We have to change things. There's one thing that people don't usually talk about, and it's really important. We're not going to get anywhere unless we're all in it together. And that means social and economic justice. If we do not address the issues of homelessness and housing and incomes for everyone and an equal playing field, we're never going to get there. So there's a lot of work to be done out there, and you're all in, I hope.
Less money for prisons and more for both.
Cynthia brings up a really, really good point, and I wrote something down, but since I got to be first today, I completely blew it off. But one thing I want to bring up is that in all the years that I've been doing whatever kind of work I do, whether it's with the IWW or with Jobs with Justice or with the Raging Grannies or Jewish Voice for Peace, whatever. Anyhow, one thing that I learned, especially through studying political science and community organizing, is that you want to, and the Occupy movement, which was incredibly instructive, is you want to look at the root causes for the problems. If you just look at the problems, it's like whacking off the arms of the hair of Medusa. She's just going to grow another black snake. So for me, the two root causes for most of the problems that I see are one, capitalism and colonialism, and two, at this point, climate change, because without a climate that's livable, none of us have a chance. And really, the capitalism and colonialism
Is why we have
the climate
That's
change.
right.
So if you go for the root of the problem, you really can't go wrong.
Okay. So we started by looking to the future, to the grandchildren, future generations, but I also wanted to look back in time a little. So I was listening to a podcast last week, and one of the speakers was indigenous, and he was talking about how the memory and the story of our ancestors in our community is more powerful than our own short-lived life experience. So you've had long-lived life experiences, but it's still short compared to your ancestors. So I'm wondering, what ways have your ancestors informed what you do?
What way have they what?
What we do.
You have to talk into the horn.
Always ask to repeat. What ways have your ancestors informed you?
How have they informed us?
Inspired you? And
Well, I told the girls on the way here that my kaya, my grandmother, told me, if you want to walk with liars, fools, cowards, or thieves, just be that way and you will. Okay, that's really big. If you want to walk with liars, fools, cowards, or thieves, just be that way and you will. In this world, in the next world. Now, that's a scared straight.
I grew up in Brooklyn. I'm Jewish. That was the 30s and 40s. I'm Ramona's age. It was a terrible time for Jews. It's hard to say that now
It
because
wasn't so hot for Indians. There was tremendous anti-Semitism. My mother used to hide her name. She wouldn't give her real name. I was told that I was lucky I was going to be able to pass because I have a little nose and my name didn't sound Jewish.
Oh, me too.
That's funny.
I'm sorry, that was great.
So it gave me a sensitivity to the underdog that I would never have gotten had I not had that bringing up, and I'm really grateful to have it.
If you didn't have that little nose.
Girl in black.
Oh God, another wandering Jew. I am too. So I was raised just outside of DC, and I remember that there were places as a Jewish family that we couldn't go. We couldn't buy a house. We couldn't go to the country club, not that we could afford it. But you know, we're talking about coming out of World War II. So I have, as an Ashkenazi Jew, I have relatives that were killed in Germany, and I remember, oh my God, oh, never again, never again. And of course, we have had it again. We've had it continually. We've had genocide since this country was founded against the indigenous people. We've had the genocide against the enslaved people that we brought into this country. We've seen genocide in Cambodia with Pol Pot. We've seen genocides continually in the world. And that really informs, as you said, it informs me in terms of a sense of justice. So, for instance, right now, I'm a member of Jewish Voice for Peace that works for Palestinian rights and equity in Israel and in Palestine. Because to be Jewish is not the same thing as believing in the policy of Israel. I am passionate about justice. When I see injustice, I have to stand up and say something, because that's what's right. And I forgot what the question was.
How have your ancestors?
What did our ancestors teach?
So yeah, to reason, to use my reason, the Jewish culture is pretty famous for study and education and deep inquiry and passion for justice. There's an expression called tikkun olam, which means to heal the world. That's a Hebrew expression. And I'd never heard it when I was growing up, but when I did hear it as a grown up, the light bulb went on. And I think we all have a duty to try to heal the world.
Yeah, I come from a rather different background. I was raised in a fundamentalist Baptist working class family, and I think what happened to me is I actually took seriously what the words of Jesus were, and I don't think that was what was intended in my church. And I got in trouble all the time, and in fact I made my 5th grade Sunday school teacher cry by asking a lot of questions. So, but I think I did, what I drew out of it was a very strong sense of, you know, justice, equality, the things that if you actually look at the words that Jesus actually said in the Bible, that he actually did stand for, but no fundamentalist religion in this country now, or even when I was a kid, actually, you know, wants to hear about. So that's, I guess, what I got from my family, and also being raised very much working class, never having enough money, always worrying about, you know, were we going to be able to put food on the table. It's very different from, I think, people who grow up with money. It's just, it's a difference, and you're more sensitive to, I think, the struggles of other people, at least if it works out well, that's the effect it has on you. So certainly my grandmothers were kind, good people. I don't remember them as, teaching me anything in particular that, has come out of my social activism, but
there were, I didn't realize you had your own mic over there.
She gave me hers.
That was a good one. Growing up, there were no dogs or Indians allowed signs. And when I moved to Tacoma in '68, there still were no dogs or Indians allowed signs. Not as many, but it was a lingering thought. And my mom talked. All of our Puyallup families have survived genocide, but they don't talk. The bureau schools beat all emotion out of the Indian children. My mom said, stoic, we weren't stoic. They beat us stoic. If you laughed, you got in trouble. If you cried, you got in trouble. If you laughed, cried, showed anger, none of that was permitted in the boarding schools. And so she said, but who can get on a table and tell a joke, do a dance, get in a fight, maybe go honeymoon around? She says, drunks can have feelings. And so we drink so we can have feelings. And so she told me if I learned to laugh and dance and honeymoon and get in a fight without alcohol, I'd never have to drink. And anybody want to fight?
I actually was joking that at the end we could do some arm wrestling and see who wins.
But see, it is, what we're doing with PSELNG is fighting.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't give them a break. There's no breaks. We've got to be on it all the time. And so my mom told me the history. So that's why I was able to testify, because none of that's written down anywhere. And whoever writes a history is who decides what happened.
Right.
And so, that's,
That's why we get so many lies taught in the schools.
Right.
I'll say that again.
I said that's why we get so many lies taught in the schools, because it's all the rich white male history is what we're getting.
I couldn't have said it better. But she told me the stories, and she told me the history, and I absorbed it and understood it, and it's tragic and it's pitiful, and I could just start talking and burst into tears because it is terrible, but we'll never get justice, and we are really having to settle for revenge. There's not ever going to be justice for what happened to our tribe, but every time our tribe attains something or reclaims something, something is achieved and there's some benefit, It's, we know the government hates us. We know Trump really hates the Indians for the casinos, because he went bust in casinos. He couldn't do it. So he's really full of resentment. So Indian country is, going to be in deep doo-doo if we don't get a revolution here pretty quick. And, we really are going to have 50,000 teenagers marching on the White House for just the gun laws. It's really going to happen. Maybe we laid the groundwork, but I think these kids are really going to do it. That's what I see coming, and I'm grateful and thankful. And maybe our little rallies, maybe we were their role models, because those kids whipped out signs in a jiffy, didn't they?
Yeah.
They were, in their grief and in their pain and in their shock, they still made some damn good signs really, really fast. And I think they learned it from all of us. So I'm very optimistic.
So on that note, I think this is probably the most predictable question, but thinking about the kids and the kids who are going to be marching all over the country soon, if you could talk to one of them, talk to them and really have them listen and hear something from you, what you've learned throughout your lives and being part of resistance movements, what would you tell somebody who's young and just getting involved that you've learned?
All you have is your body. Put it on the line.
Well, it only takes 3% of us to change things. Only 3% to get out there, and it works. I remember what happened to Estonia when it got sick of Russia being in their country. People got out and started singing, and pretty soon 25% of the country was in the streets singing, and the Russians couldn't do anything but leave. So it doesn't take that much, but it does take a concerted effort. And I used to think there was no hope, and yet Chris Hedges said that courage and anger are the sisters of hope. And I sure do have that. And so I guess I am hopeful for the future. I kind of have to be for my grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
So, first of all, I think young people have already figured out what it took me a lot of years to learn, which is that they can take their anger and they can turn that into constructive action. If you don't do something with anger and frustration, it turns inward and it eats you up and makes you feel helpless. You're not helpless. Use that anger in constructive ways. Second thing is, there is a gentleman whose name was Miles Horton who founded the Highlander School. And he said, if you want to make change, you need to be seriously in it for the long haul. So that is not, patience is not something that comes naturally to young people, but it's something that I would like to be able to pass on for them to keep in mind. Now, I've also learned that what seems like overnight change actually took longer in the making. We just see the tipping point, the point at which it changes. I like to remind myself that the work we do is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Which means that there are times when you have to hand the baton off to somebody else to take it up, and then when you're able again, then you can take the baton back and run with it. But that means, because a sprint is not necessarily cooperative, but a marathon is. You're passing that baton back and forth. So that's something that I'd like to share with young people. And you've got to enjoy the work, the process, while you're doing it, or it will kill you. So whether it's taking time to appreciate beauty in human beings, in nature, in everything around you, whether it's taking time to laugh. Emma Goldman, and she was pretty famous, said, I don't want any party of your revolution if I can't dance. So it's got to be part of your life process. If you look at it as if this is just something I'm going to do and then I'm going to stop, then you get dismayed by the fact that it goes on and on. And even when you accomplish the one goal, you still see goals in the future. Make it a way of life and make it beautiful.
I think anyone that thinks our kids aren't patient has never watched our kids play video games. No, I'm so serious. They focus, they concentrate, they'll stay right with it, they'll keep working on something and working on it. And if they fail, they just keep going. But I tell them, I tell at least I guess I haven't told Mariah this yet, but you were blessed with just one body. It's like in a video game, but you just get one man. You have to take really, really good care of that body because you only get the one. There's no start over, no do-over button. But I really do think that video games have taught our kids to just stick with something, just stay right with it, and don't put it down until you get it done. And I really think that's going to work. Like in the military, nobody can beat us because of the video games. Our young people are all so quick-witted and survival trained from how they play. Nobody can beat America, which is good, I guess. Sad in some respects, but it's these video games are important.
I have to say I've had the great pleasure of working with a lot of young activists in Seattle over the last few years, and I am so tremendously impressed with the young people. I have to say I'm not sure I have anything to tell them because I've been learning from them. I've learned a great deal from this sort of group of people who are sort of like between 15 and about 35. They're just amazing, amazing people. I guess for somebody starting out, for like the kids who are just now walking out of high school and starting their activism, I'd say, do not get co-opted into party politics, electoral politics. That is a dead end. Yeah. There is, the politicians, the system as it is never going to work. Do not get talked into being polite and, this respectability politics bullshit. Because it doesn't work. You have to be relentless. Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will, and this is absolutely the truth. You have to demand repeatedly, and if they don't act, then you go and you occupy their offices and you do whatever it takes. And that's how you get action.
Spoilers.
So when I'm not sure if everybody heard, but when I first asked that question, Ramona said, put your bodies on the line. And I just heard Annette saying, occupy their offices. And to do that, I know for me, it comes with some fear, certainly the first time. And I was thinking, reading about you, Ramona, spying on you, learning about your history, stalking you on the internet. I thought, well, I should know who the panelists are. That would be a good thing as the moderator. Justified stalking. I read about what you mentioned in your intro about the fishing, the encampment to defend the traditional fishing ways and the ways that the cops raided it with guns, and just imagine what a scary moment that must have been for you. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about how you felt when that happened, and then if others want to share after when you took action and you were in a situation with risk when the cops were moving in, whether it's the actions you talked about or other ones, did you have moments of fear, and what was it like for you? Sure.
Yeah. If you get scared enough, you walk like Frankenstein, all stiff-legged. And so I told you what my kaya said about cowards, and when you cross the veil, if you're a coward, you'll be with cowards, and I didn't want to be with no cowards. And so you can't cry or run if you're scared to cry and run. So I was, there were actually 550 pigs and the National Rifle Association that came down on our fishing camp. And we were, dang. I want to tell you guys. We had our camp all set up, and this carload of women come rolling through, and they jumped out and started unloading stuff, and I'm all curious what you got there, and they unloaded a case of Tampax, and I said, Tampax? I didn't ask for Tampax. We need Kotex for pressure packs for bullet wounds. And they said, oh, we didn't know you asked for anything. These are your fuses for your Molotov cocktails. And I said, who are you? They said, we're the radical women from Seattle. And so that's how I met those girls. We had as many as 450 people in the camp at one time. Our base group was right around, I would say right around 300. And I cleared all of the kids out of the camp to get back to school and sent some of their parents home. And so it was the 9th of September, and there were 60 of us in the camp, 62 actually. And we had about 15 older juveniles in the camp. It was a mix of men and women, and Indians had come from Canada and all over America to stand with us, to help us. And it was straight up terrifying. I had, well, they came in tack gear, with all of the masks, and they marched in on us, and then one pointed like a rifle at me that had a barrel like this, and pulled the trigger, and it was pointed right at me, and he pulled the trigger, and I thought it was going to be a through and through. I watch a lot of 48 hours, but it was a gas canister. It was a damn gas canister, and it just bounced off me and fell on the ground, and I organized a game of kick the gas canister, because if you pulled their masks off and kick the gas canisters back at them, so it turned into like a soccer game. All the idiots were trying to pull masks off them and kicking their canisters back at them. and I coined a phrase that's now famous. I yelled, "Tear gas, don't bother us Indians." The ones that can remember still tease me about that. The National Rifle Association was in a kneeling position on the other side of the river, and they were popping off shots, and there were a lot of us there. And I can only believe that our ancestors were with us that day, because none of our lives were lost. And that morning, the chief of police came to the barricade at the edge of the camp, and he told me that we needed to disband or we were all going to be arrested, whatever. And I told him, this is tribal land, you have no jurisdiction. If you come on our property, you will be trespassing. And so after all that, we had teepees that the Eagle Speaker family had brought down from Canada for us, and teepee poles that had been cut and brought in. They bulldozed our little village, and it was the director of the health department of Pierce County that ordered the camp bulldozed. His name was McNutt. Now, he's the one that gave the order, and all of our personal, everything we owned was in that camp. They just bulldozed our property while we were in jail. And in the end, Hank Adams went to Washington, D.C. Yes, you will Google Hank Adams. Hank Adams went to Washington, D.C. He met with the Department of Interior solicitor, and he got a letter that stated, "We own the river, we own the land, we have jurisdiction, and anyone that came on our property was trespassing." Yay! But I was looking at 35 years in prison for just saying, my people have a right to life, my people have a right to live. And that's what it'll get you. And I'm sure if our ancestors did what we did, and they were murdered for it. And I'm sure if our children today did what we did, they would be called terrorists, and Homeland Security would find a new Guantanamo, and there'd be a whole bunch of Indians on it. I mean, we're on hard times, but everybody needs to remember we were with the flow. This is 1970, the whole civil rights movement, the whole peace strikes against the Vietnam War. I mean, everybody was in motion who had a brain. And we helped them, and they stood with us. And it wouldn't have worked at another time. It was tried at another time, and they hung our chiefs. It was really now or never. We were out of time on the building. Our property over there was on a 20-year lease where the state owned 5% more every year. And we were on the 19th year for our hospital property. When we evicted the state and occupied our own property, that was, and they would have blown us up. They said they would, and they would have. They had rocket launchers all around the building, and they would have given us a certain period of time and then just blown the building up. And like Scotty Calloway said, that's the only way you're getting us out of here. You went like that. The state people were startled. And I said, I'll bet you think that he's a radical. He's not even a radical. He's the director of our clinic. He has 3 master's degrees and 1 is in public health. I said, the radicals are the ones that are sitting at the back of the room. They don't say anything, but they're all Vietnam trained. Your government trained them. And they're ready. They're gonna go if we need to go. So, yes, it's terrifying, but you know, these movements, we have formed so many alliances through the PSE, LNG. I mean, these people are closer than family. You know, it's, all of these movements have been like that. I'm sure Standing Rock was like that. The people in the building, the 1,500 people that stood with us when we occupied the building, there wasn't a person there that didn't know why they were there, and there wasn't a person there that would have fled. You know, I mean, it's tight, it's close, it's a war zone. It's like any military operation. And the fishing camp was certainly that way. So it's scary, but you're not alone. Although dying is always an individual thing. I've been telling people, if you're in a plane and it goes down, the dying is still an individual thing.
So I want to ask I think a related question, and if Marilyn, Cynthia, and Annette want to add on to the question of fear, I think you could do it here. Which is, you know, a lot of people, well, everybody in this room is familiar with the Tacoma, the LNG resistance. And I imagine a lot of people in the room have been part of that, of actions there, of going to hearings, of trying to stop that.
And we thank you.
And what would you say to somebody considering doing direct action to stop construction now?
It's the only way. It's what we have to do now, especially at the Tacoma LNG plant. We have a precedent in that court now. We have a precedent in that court on this issue of the land that the LNG facility is on, and we need to keep testing that. So that means we need a lot of people to be storming that place, continuing doing what we did. You know, I never got frightened. I really believed that what I was doing was so important that it kept me awake. And like Annette, I'm old. You know, I've had a good life. If I went to jail, it wouldn't be such a big thing. I'd probably take Howard Zinn with me and become a preacher. So I think it's the most meaningful thing you can do is to put your body to the cause of something you believe in.
I forgot the question.
Two-part.
I was more amused than frightened because we presented such a non-threatening kind of a scene. And 16 cop cars showed up, 17, and I think there was a helicopter. And it was such overkill. It was such an exquisite display of fire department, ambulances, military equipment going to police forces. There is a group called Sweet Honey in the Rock, and I know you probably all have heard of them. And Bernice Reagan was explaining during the civil rights movement when she was asked if she was afraid. She said, there comes a point when you know you're doing the right thing, and there is just a surrounding of synchronicity and rightness around you, and you come to the point where you realize that if you get killed, and you might get killed, that is not your concern. That's somebody else's job to kill you. You're doing what you need to do. And as an old person, what I look for, what I need to know, is that I've been of use. The most horrible thing in the world for me would be to die thinking that I was useless and my life didn't have meaning, that I hadn't been of use to some larger thing. That would be horrendous. So that's what I live for.
Yeah, I would add on to that. I would not want to be on my deathbed and tell my children and grandchildren that I have not done everything in my power to turn this mess around. Whether we're talking about climate change or social justice, I want to be able to say I did everything. If that put me at risk for jail or my life at risk, that's okay. I mean, especially at my stage of life. I have had my life. I want my children to have a life, and they're not going to if we don't turn this around and turn this around fast. So that's, critically important to me. As far as the fear goes, there have been moments, of course. I've been arrested, I think, 5 times. I would say when Emily and I were arrested at shutting down the pipeline, I would say definitely my most fearful moment was when a huge unmarked helicopter flew over us back and forth about 4 times, and I think I said to Emily something to the effect of, is that the Department of Homeland Security coming to whisk us away to a prison no one has ever heard of and we will never be heard again? Because, that thought definitely crossed my mind.
Or at least it's gonna drop DDT.
Yeah, exactly. Drop some horrible chemicals on us or something. In retrospect, it was probably Enbridge's private security. It was the Enbridge pipeline we were shutting down. But that was, for a few moments, pretty scary. I think the other, after the fact moment that has been the most scary is we had 84 congresspeople ask for us to be prosecuted as terrorists under federal law. They, wrote a letter to the Justice Department to that effect. And when that first came out, I was a little concerned because we're already being prosecuted for felonies in the states, and that would mean additional federal charges on top of it, which would mean that I probably would spend the rest of my life in jail. I don't have that many years left. So far, apparently the Justice Department has pretty much ignored that, and we aren't terribly worried about it at the moment. But that is a scary thought. I just wanted to add one other thing that isn't even relevant to the question, but Ramona mentioning PSE, she's well aware of this, but if you have any idea about, them ever doing anything decent, forget it. The whole time I worked as staff attorney at the Puyallup Tribe, and I came in 1984, we were always battling them on something. Always. They were always doing something horrible, whether it was their dams that were keeping the fish from getting up the river, and they had, what our biologists called biostitutes that they would hire, and because they could get them to say that, there were never fish in the river up there. Because it's not a good word. It was true. It was the PSE paid them to say things that were absolutely clearly lies, and they did. They are one of the worst companies. I mean, I am no fan of corporations, period, but they are one of the worst of the worst, and there is no way that, they're going to stop doing what they're doing. I think, they're already violating a bunch of laws. They don't care. It is up to us to stop them.
And direct action.
And direct action is really important.
Yeah, civil disobedience and direct action is what gets the work done. But, advice, now I remember the whole question. So, if you're going to do civil disobedience, plan it. Plan it, and keep it secret.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Don't let stooges in. Keep it secret, plan it well, and do it. But do it with numbers.
When we evicted the state out of the hospital building, it was the Cushman Hospital building was an Indian Health Hospital, and it had been transferred to the state, and it was, illegally. That's how we got it back. Sometimes they steal things so fast they don't even steal them legally. So it was known as Cascadia.
Right.
Do any of you remember this?
I do.
Okay. Anyway,
All those old ones up here do.
anyway, when we did a tribal council resolution and we served it on them. And this is one time that John Wayne Theater really came in handy because they were terrified. There were these great big tall guards, and I was probably bigger than Allison Bridges at that time, and the other girl. So the three of us served this eviction notice in form of a resolution. And they were like, Indians! And they were armed. And they were running in circles, all traumatized, asking me what they should do. And of course, I told them, leave the kids, one security person can stay in each pot of 26 kids. We're taking over the kitchen. We have high pressure enginemen, we'll leave the furnace on. I could run a PBX because I had been a phone operator. I'd say, Cascadia, Puyallup Tribe. But there were 188 kids, and they wanted to transport them right then in buses to Western State, and I wouldn't let them. I said, these kids are from all over the state. There should be regional diagnostic programs. It's cruel to make families from Spokane and Vancouver and all over the place try to maintain contact with their children. These are kids from poor families, or they'd have good lawyers and they wouldn't be here. And these poor families, are already struggling. And so these kids should be in diagnostic programs in their own regions. And we'd already gone through the desks of the staff and found pornography. We'd already found padded cells in the basement. And we were gonna spill their beans, and so they decided, they better listen. So they did leave the 188 kids there. We kept them fed. The kids were saying, can we join your army? Can we stay? We like you Indians. And a couple of them were Indians, and we did keep them. But they made regional arrangements, and they came and took the kids. And I verified that because I worked in child welfare. I knew those snakes. So then, now they took the kids. The legislators got together to retroactively pass a law to charge me with 188 counts of kidnapping. Can you imagine how long the river would have to be for me to go up for 188 counts of kidnap? And that was amusing too. Are you kidding? Some of the legislators, when they found out what a horrible program that was, we're actually grateful that we had revealed it. But most of them were asses. State Senator Day from Spokane was the head of the DSHS department at that time. And I wondered why he didn't care about the kids, and then he got charged as a pedophile. Then we knew why he didn't care. Did you remember something else, Marilyn?
No, I had just come out to the Pacific Northwest by way of San Francisco.
I was busy being a hippie-dippy in San Francisco, but I was also part of the reclaiming of People's Park in Berkeley. And of course, the American Indian movement had started to emerge, at least to my consciousness, and they had taken Alcatraz. And I remember Alcatraz. And then I came up to Washington State and heard about Ramona Bennett. And she's been a hero of mine ever since. And I told you the other day that I get tongue-tied around you because I think so much of you, but my lack of words has nothing to do with how I feel. I want to know if anybody here has any questions, because we're just going on and on and on.
It's perfect timing. I was actually gonna maybe think about that for a second. We'll have time for one or two questions. We don't have that much time. I'm hoping Annette can give a quick update on her legal case. She has an outstanding legal case right now, and I think it's important folks know about it, where it's at.
How old are you, Annette?
I am almost 66. And I'm the youngster here. I'm the youngster. Emily and I were actually granted the necessity defense, which is when you argue that basically, yes, you technically committed a crime, but you did it to prevent a greater harm. And our judge is the only one of the 5 of us who did this who was willing to grant that, but the prosecutor immediately appealed. It was heard in the Minnesota Court of Appeals last week, February 15th. They had oral argument, and our lawyer is cautiously optimistic that we might even get a dismissal of the appeal, because the judges seem to be questioning the prosecutor a great deal about how this was even a proper appeal. So if it gets dismissed as not having been properly appealed, then I think that pretty much ensures that we will be allowed to present a necessity defense. And that would be great. And we don't know when our trial will be, but we assume it will be at the earliest maybe May, and probably more likely sometime this summer. The others who were charged, Ken was charged here, was convicted of 1 felony, and he got community service, which we always knew Washington would be the easiest jurisdiction, and I almost completed that. Michael Foster in North Dakota just got sentenced to 3 years in prison, and he is in the state prison in Bismarck, North Dakota. 2 years are suspended, so he has 1 year of actual prison time to do. Very, very grim. And Leonard Higgins will be sentenced in Montana in about 3 weeks on, I think it's March 20th, and that's the status of all of our cases at this point.
Great, so I think we have time for at least one question. So if you have a question, you want to put your hand up, and then I'll okay. All right, you want to come up and actually use the mic? It might be easier for everyone to hear.
My name is Helen Gilbert. I'm in Radical Women, so thanks for the shout out. It's great to hear revolutionary women at the front of the room, a group of revolutionary women. But I think in addition to the power of direct action and civil disobedience, I wanted to say I think there's also the power of mass action that's open in the streets. It doesn't always have to be secret and clandestine. Sometimes we can go out openly and say, we are fighting for this. Get your unions, get your teacher organizations, get your student organizations involved for things like fighting the sexual harassment, or fighting for tenant rights, or fighting against a possible military parade. We need to be out there in the streets in the numbers, and there's a place for civil disobedience. We've been part of it, but also there's a place for mass action where we show our faces and we get everybody on board. So you've all done them all. So
Like a big flash mob.
So
Which brings me to the initiatives that are around the back of the building at the tables. Initiative 1600 for single-payer universal medical care for all in Washington State. Sign those puppies.
any other questions? I see a man back here. Do you want to come on up?
Okay, I have a question. It might be a little bit loaded with the time we have left. Sorry, okay, so I am a child, okay? I'm 20 years old, and the things that I had believed in are like totally being shaken, right? I've just been raised in this culture. And now I find that I really believe in one thing. I believe in love. And you're sitting in front of a sign, and I want to know what you have to say about love. Just really, it's at its core.
I think it's safe for me to actually speak for everybody here. I think everything we do from love.
Yes.
We love our children, we love our grandchildren, we love your generation and the generations to come. That's why we do this, because we love this earth so deeply, and we love the people on it so deeply, and we want it to survive, and we want it to be better. That's why we do it.
Grandfather Creator created this world, and on each continent, different people were put with beautiful plants and all different animals, everything different, everything wonderful. And when it was all done, Creator stepped back and said, "It's nothing. What's wrong? What did I do wrong? Oh, I've got it." And just sprinkled love. He said, "No, it's good." Life is nothing without love.
You're right. This is all about love. We do it for our children, our grandchildren. I look at the beautiful animals that we are losing so rapidly now and think, what right did we have to do this to those animals? So many, they're all smarter than us. They don't take more than they need, unlike people. I don't know how we get it back, but yeah, it's all about love, all about love.
And I'm optimistic. In spite of everything, I'm optimistic. And I expressed love better than I can, so I'll just leave it at that.
This is great.
No.
It's time for the arm wrestling. We're actually coming to an end for a panel, and I wanted to ask Ramona, since we started with an opening prayer, should we close with a prayer as well?
I think the Annette said the prayer.
But Kathy's trying to ask something. There's something she really wants to say. What is it, Kathy?
You gonna tell the cop in the river story? It's a great story.
All right. So this is like the encore, the cop in the river story. I don't know if I should be afraid or not.
Oh, here, I'll use this mic. Just hang on to it. When we were in Puyallup camp, which was an armed camp, one of the pigs, big guy, grabbed me and pulled me, and what I was supposed to do was resist, but instead I jumped at him, and I haven't had any martial arts training or anything, but I jumped toward him, and he was so startled, his hands went up, and he rolled down the embankment into the river. He just went ass over tea kettle down the embankment and splashed into the river, and They charged me with assault. That was part of the 35 years they wanted to lock me up for. But on the subject of that box of tampons, LD Bratt was a nurse, maybe one little step up, and she had run the Alcatraz clinic on Alcatraz Island, and she was up supporting us. And, you know, when everybody woke up and there were all these cops everywhere, and they were up on the bridge with guns pointing down at us, there was nowhere to run and nowhere to hide, but she couldn't really find anybody that she knew. So she just kind of went walking through the camp, and she seen a box. And so she just sat down on that box to wait to see what happened. And it was a box of Molotov cocktails. So, how many of you know who Ben Bratt is? Actor, Miss Congeniality. Who knows who Ben Bratt is? You all live under rocks? Don't none of you go to movies? Anyway, that was Ben Bratt's mom. and Peter's and George's. But anyway, she was sitting on that box of Molotov cocktails. So see, that's where them tampons ended up. with LD Bratt sitting on them. And they're big charges, for sitting on boxes of Molotov cocktails. They were going to lock the woman up for about 20 years for just being scared and sitting down. Got you rolling down the embankment story.
So doesn't this seem like a lot of fun, being part of the resistance?
Don't you just want to go to riots with us all the time?